Welcome back to Just the Truth, where we're continuing the conversation to reveal the truth about the transgender agenda. And joining me now is my good friend Brandon Showalter, who is a reporter for Christian Post. And you have to follow his work because he has written so many exposés about the truth behind the transgender movement and the horrendous atrocities that this movement is foisting upon children. I have just a couple of headlines here, Brandon, that sterilizing children. Bill heads to California Senate floor amid public outcry. They're devouring our sons. Moms of gender-confused boys unite, detail their anguish. Alabama Senate passes bill to ban prescribing of puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones. I mean, I can't believe this is actually happening in America.
It's the medical scandal of the century. There are days when I sit at my news desk and I ask myself, if I wasn't the one reporting on this, would I even believe it? I do hear regularly from moms in anguish, as you just said, as they are forced to watch the slow motion dissociation and disintegration of their own children. And they are told by supposed professionals in society that they hate their children. People have the gall to tell them that. Their daughters go to Planned Parenthood and get testosterone. Their kids wind up on college campuses and they are fast-tracked into these gender clinic facilities. These kids wind up sterile. These kids wind up, I say kids, but they're young adults, but still, they're teenagers. Many of them are. They're still minors, a lot of them are. And they get this stuff and their bodies are permanently damaged. No parent wants their kid to go through something like that. And the carnage just continues to pile up in my inbox. I see brutalized bodies, daughters of these parents with their breasts sliced off, bearded because they're on testosterone. They don't look like men. They look like facsimiles of men, and they will never be men because human beings can't change sex. I can hardly believe that we're living through this. This is almost like the eugenics movement. Now, I don't think that's hyperbole.
Yeah, and Brandon, when you see someone like Governor Hutchinson in Arkansas who is using the pretext of the principle of limited government to say, hey, we can't step in and protect these children, what is your response? It's stunning to me to see that. I think it is cowardly. I mean, are we really going to say the government doesn't have a place? If someone was taking a child out back and torturing him with chemicals, you would absolutely intervene there. There are doctors that are doing this. And I appreciate you saying chemical castration because that is exactly what it is. Almost as disgusting as using limited government to, as a shield against doing anything about this is most mainstream media coverage of this issue, which talks about this as though this is healthcare. Right.
Since when do we administer drugs to a child for a psychological problem that forecloses their fertility, that sterilizes them? That doesn't become magically medically ethical just because it comes wrapped in a rainbow flag or a pink and blue striped transgender banner. I mean, if anything, government should protect the vulnerable, and who could be more vulnerable than our children? And I'll just say too, many of these children that are being mired in this madness also have other kinds of mental health comorbidities, autism, social anxiety, depression. These are especially vulnerable children, and if government should protect anyone or anything, it should be them.
Absolutely. And, we've talked a lot about, and you've written a lot about the truth behind the pharmaceutical companies and how this is all about big money. This isn't about love and care and compassion toward children and, finding out who they really are. This is all about creating a new group of people who will benefit, supposedly, of course, put that in quotes, who are actually victims, really, of an entirely new definition and new community of constituents and of consumers.
That's right. And the figure that I've seen in recent years is that approximately, I think it's 2% of American high schoolers now self-identify as something other than their biological sex, as transgender, or the alphabet soup letters and the ever-growing LGBTQ stuff. And
yeah, there's probably more than 50
Who
now.
knows what it is now, but how many of those are going the medicalized route, I don't know, but that's a large customer base and it's growing. Because if you go on these medications, again, in quotes, you will be on them for life. This is a lifetime of enslavement to the medical industrial establishment. It's not liberating to be a medical patient for life. It's enslaving. And I think it's such a disservice to those who are genuinely struggling. There are young kids who are experiencing gender confusion and depression and some very intense psychiatric issues. And as conservatives and as Christians and as just decent human beings, you don't have to be politically conservative to have compassion on people who are legitimately suffering. But we shouldn't be drugging a condition that's going to alter the delicate ecosystem that is the human endocrine system, because gender confusion is not an endocrine condition, but it becomes one once you introduce foreign hormones that wouldn't ordinarily be there.
Yeah, and I remember...
And people will make a lot of money off this too if you're a lifetime customer. That's a pretty big pipeline.
Yes, exactly. And I remember reading, I think it was probably in Huffington Post or some other liberal magazine, about a man who castrated himself and put the fake everything else of a woman, and then was saying in there he knew that he was choosing to have basically a self-inflicted open wound for life, and was describing how painful this was.
Oh, it's horrible.
And since when is that care and compassion to not be able to speak truth and to say, okay, if this is something that you are confused about, let's honor the body, and let's honor, as our friend Nancy Pearcey says in her book Love Thy Body, that's something where the mind has to then be in alignment with the truth of biology rather than self-inflicted harm. And especially, we're talking about harm now that's inflicted by parents on children.
Oh, yes. Oh, it's absolutely true. We have absolutely lost reverential regard for the human body. The human body is a wonderful, wondrous, glorious thing, really, and we're desecrating the body. This is not health care. This is not good medicine. It's not ethical whatsoever. We're not just an amalgamation of parts smashed up together. We're an integrated whole being. And it isn't a human right or a health care right to be able to self-harm. And I'll say, too, that detransitioners, those who have gone through some of this horrible medicalization and are now regretting it, they get dropped like hot potatoes. They do not get treated well by people, medical professionals that they once thought were helping them, once they realized that this wasn't really working out. We're going to be seeing more of those stories as they're now trying to make noise through unconventional media outlets, but the proverbial, the mainstream mass media will not give them a voice because it doesn't dovetail with the approved LGBT, emphasis on T, narrative.
Right, and so because these detransitioners are now saying this was horrific, this was something that I should have never chosen, they're talking about the actual truth of their biological body.
Yes.
That doesn't go along with the point that the mainstream media wants to sell in big pharmaceuticals and all that.
This is life-saving healthcare.
Exactly,
Yeah, right.
and so now that's never going to be in media, but that's why your work at the Christian Post is so important, and especially like this article, They're Devouring Our Sons, Moms of Gender-Confused Boys Unite, detail their anguish. I mean, these are people that you've personally talked to about parents who are experiencing this type of tragedy.
Oh, and people need to know, I hear from a wide variety of people, very left-wing from the deep blue San Francisco Bay Area to the ruby red deep south. People from across the spectrum, religious, non-religious, Republican, Democrat, centrists, from all walks of life, from all over the country, from other countries as well. They know in their gut level that it's impossible to be born in the wrong body. That's the great big ferocious lie that underpins all of this. No one has ever been or ever will be born in the wrong body. Your body is you get the body that you get. And that's
God doesn't
just
make
it.
mistakes.
No, he doesn't make mistakes. And
we can make mistakes by not identifying ourselves correctly and honoring our body.
Right.
But God doesn't make mistakes. And if we look at the truth of the reality to which we're presented, I mean, Brandon, I just so appreciate that you have the courage and boldness to be writing these stories. And there are so many people now in Christian Post who, as you've said, I mean, there are even the feminist movement who's looking at this and saying, now men who are claiming to be women are encroaching on women's rights. I mean, there's so many implications for society.
There are men that are claiming to be lesbians. That's how insane it has gotten. I mean, and I can't not write about this, and my colleagues also do great reporting on this, and there are other outlets, thankfully, National Review, The Federalist, and radical feminists even publish there. Some of them are they're very left-wing in their views, but they see the truth, and the truth is true no matter who says it, Jenna. I know you know that. So it's like, I have met with many of these parents who are absolutely distraught about what has happened to their kids. And, in fact, I think it was about 2 years ago, I had a number of them in my house for dinner. And I like almost every night, I can see their faces right here in front of my face, just as I'm about to go to sleep, and I pray for them often. And, the average American knows that what we're saying is true. Many of them are have been cowed into silence, but these poor parents have very few places to turn. And if I, as a journalist, I mean, yes, I'm a Christian, but if I don't tell the truth, who will? I mean, they know that the gender identity emperor, his brazen nakedness filling the room, hasn't got a single stitch of clothing on. And it's high time for the madness to stop, and it's especially high time that we stop surgically slicing up and sterilizing our children in service to a big, fat, ferocious lie called gender identity apart from biological sex. These parents are utterly distraught and suffering. They need a voice, and people do have to be bold. I mean, their lives are torturous hell every single day. I can't imagine what it would be like watching my own kid think that it was a good thing to tear apart their bodies and poison themselves and never be able to have children. I mean, what are we stealing from the next generation? It's unconscionable.
Yeah, and having doctors basically telling parents that you're not being loving if you don't support this in a 3-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 10-year-old. I mean,
or even as a teenager.
Or even as a teenager. This is absolutely absurd that there's this type of lie that's being perpetuated under the myth of healthcare, which is also how they get the whole myth of abortion as well. I mean, this is just a disgusting thing.
It really is as bad as it's so much worse than even people know. I mean, I can't discuss everything that I have learned on the air here because some of this stuff is still confidential. But I mean, all of the professions where you would expect parents to be able to get some solid, stable help have been corrupted by this ideology.
Wow.
We're full of lies. But the worst, I think, is the media, who insists on framing this with euphemisms that obscure the truth.
And that's why, Brandon, we have to make sure that you're continuing to teach the truth and speak out. And so read Brandon's articles on Christian Post, follow him on social media, and we'll be right back with more of Just the Truth.